Thanks, guys, for spending the next 20 minutes with me. So as Tim said, my name is David Rudnitsky. I run sales at a local company called Yext. If you're not familiar with Yext, about 5-6 weeks ago, we went public on the New York Stock Exchange, and we help you manage all the public facts about your business. So wherever in the world you want to get discovered, for you, your product, your people, your services, at that moment of intent, when someone is ready to either buy something from you or learn more about you, we make it discoverable through any device, any intelligent service, any platform in the world. I'm really excited today to speak with you because I spent, as Tim said, the better part of 12 and a half years in a sales leadership position at Salesforce.com. So coming here today and spending the time with you feels like family. I'm going to take the next 20 minutes and share with you two things. One, a playbook that has served me well in my career. So whether it was in the early days of Oracle or Netscape, Ariba, Salesforce.com, or now Yext, it's a playbook that needs to really be dynamic over time, and I'll share some elements of it with you. There's a set of tactics that help you execute on a playbook, and there's a perspective, there's a mindset that I believe as sales leaders, sales reps, you need to bring to work every day to be successful. So when you look at a playbook, to me, whether you're playing football, you're playing basketball, you're celebrating like the Warriors have been celebrating the last couple nights, or you're a professional salesperson. Well, I can't say anything about the New York Knicks, so I might as well go for the team that just won it, right? You have a playbook that defines a set of plays that you think are going to make you successful. But I will tell you, in sales, your playbook needs to be scalable because you expect success to follow that playbook, so you want to make it scalable. It needs to be repeatable because it does none of us good if I use it a few times and I can't get repeated success of it. And it needs to be dynamic. If you think about the industry, particularly the technology industry, how many changes have we seen? Unfortunately, Tim's mentioned the amount of time I've been selling, and I live local, but I've typically covered jobs that cover the country. In the last 35 years, when I first started selling in the technology industry, it was all about IBM mainframes. And there weren't a lot of choices. But you had to be dynamic in your thinking because it had been around forever. And then when I was at Oracle, we moved to client server. And that was a whole different paradigm. And then when I was at Netscape, it was the internet. Not many of us knew about the internet. But I knew that I couldn't sell the same way that I did at Netscape that I did at Oracle because it's very different. And then Ariba presented a different set of challenges. It was an enterprise class application that was built for the internet. But keep in mind, at that time, it wasn't cloud, it was on-prem. And then when I got to Salesforce, the rules changed completely. And I looked at the playbook and I said, I think I know what I need to do to be successful. But at the time, Mark didn't call it cloud computing. It was utility computing. And the analogy was, imagine you look at the lights, you use the restroom. The water faucet or the light switch was analogous to the browser. And as long as you paid your bills, you got to use the application, the utilities. Then it evolved to on-demand. Then it evolved to SaaS. Then it evolved to cloud. Then platform as a service, software as a service. But all along the way, if your playbook isn't repeatable, it's not scalable, and it's certainly, if it's not dynamic, I can tell you it's not going to work over an extended period of time. Underneath the playbook, you always need to have a set of tactics to help you execute on it. And those tactics are going to change over a period of time because the marketplace will change. So think about the business that you guys are in. Not everyone in the audience is in the technology business. So think about what you need to do to be successful. And if you even examine the tactics that you use, maybe what you used 3 years ago worked, maybe 5 years ago it was unbelievable. But in 2017, does it really work? And that's really where you need to start to do a gut check to say, do I have the right set of tactics to support the playbook? And the next thing I'll talk about is a subset of a perspective that I think you need to bring to work every day. So whether you're a rep, whether you're supporting sales, whether you're a sales leader, there's a mindset that you better bring to work every day. And it's sort of like when you think about that playbook. It's a system that has to work. So I use one more sports analogy, but I'm a New York Giant fan. And I'm really happy that we beat New England twice in the Super Bowl, but I also know that New England has won more Super Bowls than we have. And what's really the one common element besides Brady and Belichick? It's their system. It works. Yet if you watch Belichick coach, the playbook has changed over the years. So the offense he was running for the first Super Bowl win was different than the most recent one. So think about your own playbook. You have to change it over time. When I think about the perspective that I bring to work every day, and the folks that have worked for me in the past are probably tired of hearing this, but when you're in a smaller company and you're trying to grow, you better have the attitude that you want to think big. You need to portray something much bigger than life to your customers and your prospects. And when you think big, you get to play big, meaning you deserve a seat at the table with the executives of your customers and your prospects. And that's really important because that is an attitude, and that's an attitude that inspires confidence. So think about what you do every day. Are you really portraying your department? Are you portraying your group? Are you portraying your region? Or do you go out there effectively portray your company? And are you thinking big? So when you think about bringing that perspective to it, there's a couple things that come into play. And these are more tactics of that perspective. The first one is passion versus arrogance. I love confident people. I love to surround myself both in my personal life and my professional life with confident people. But I hate arrogant people. It's okay to be a little cocky. It's okay to have an edge. But once you're arrogant, it comes across the wrong way. You may know more than your customer. You may know more than your prospect. You may know more than your coworkers. But avoid the arrogance. You know, you've heard the expression, check your ego at the door. You can do that and still be super confident, but don't take your customer for granted. I love when folks are paranoid. I love when I'll challenge you why you're never going to get a deal, and you'll see how that comes into play. I think it's really important for professional sellers to own the situation, to own the experience, and that if I'm negotiating with you, if I'm interacting with you, I'd rather not defer to my boss. I'd rather look at it as I own it. One of the things that I share with my team members is we give you a franchise. You join a company, give you a set of products, give you marketing tools, but at the end of the day, it's your Dunkin' Donuts, it's your McDonald's, it's your Wendy's. You know in your neighborhood, is it cappuccinos, is it lattes, is it chocolate glaze, is it sprinkles? Tell us what you need, but you have to own it, because if you own it, your customers want to engage with you more. If you own it, you start to bring them over the finish line, not necessarily turning something over, because the minute you concede ownership of that opportunity, that's the minute that they stop wanting to deal with you, and it's the minute that they want that person, that guy or girl who actually can make a decision to move things along. So think about owning the experience. Think about running it like your franchise. To me, you've got to constantly embrace change. I mean, this conference is an example of change. There's a set of vendors out there that were not part of the Salesforce ecosystem when I left. But they're awesome companies. Why? Because they've embraced change. They see the industry changing. I don't care what industry you're in, things are different. Things are significantly different if you're selling something in the technology world. I don't have to tell you that, that's obvious. But it's how quickly you respond to it, and then do you take your own playbook and adapt it? A lot of times you don't, and it's very frustrating to go out with a seller, to go out with a sales exec, and how they sell, how they portray their products, how they interact with their customers just doesn't change. It's the same. And when you get that Groundhog Day effect, nothing else works, because I've not adapted to the culture. I've not adapted to the change in my industry, to what I sell. I think it's really important, particularly when you think about social today, are you managing yourself like a brand? And I don't think people are aware of their own brand sometimes. You know, the extreme, and it's an unfortunate extreme, if you think about these kids that just got denied entrance to Harvard. They did everything right to manage their brand. They went to the right school, they got the right grades, they got the right test scores, they did the right essays. So at some point they had this pristine brand, pristine enough to get admitted to Harvard. And then it fell apart from there. Lost common sense. They were arrogant. They certainly didn't manage their brand. I will tell you, it may seem obvious, but you have to manage your brand. Shame on you if you interview somebody and you haven't seen what their brand's all about. You can kind of get a sense of what they've done professionally on LinkedIn, but then just do a few things on the internet to start searching on them. Maybe come across a Facebook page. Maybe see a side of them that said, wow, that's probably not consistent with the brand that I want for my company, what my values are, what my culture's all about. Can't make a rash decision, but there is a brand out there that you have to manage. I think once you are in an environment, boy, you better manage your brand in your own company. And that brand is not kissing somebody's behind, because that's the obvious part, right? That's the part that just comes out so obvious that it's not organic when you want to start to grow your career. But there is an organic way to grow your career, and part of it is you have a brand, because you want your brand to be, hey, that guy, that girl, that's the person, that's my go-to person. That's the person, if a promotion comes up, I really want us to think about that person. Or maybe not in a leadership role, but if there's a big opportunity, I just know I can rely on that person. And so to me, it starts with managing your brand internally. And to me, it's just being self-aware about the brand. It's extremely important. And sometimes you just got to sit back and say, how am I being portrayed to the people that I work with? So if you think about the perspective, and I said I have 20 minutes, so I'm going to share a little bit of each of these. But if at a high level, those are some of the key elements of what I think are important perspectives or mindset that you bring to work, I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes sharing some of the plays from the playbook and some of the tactics that support it with a few examples. And then I think we might have time for just a couple questions. So the first one sort of goes back to this whole idea of the world is social. Shame on you if you do a cold call, a complete cold call. The days of picking up and dialing and hoping to get someone on the phone, hoping you say the right thing at the right time, are dead. In today's environment, you have to have a warm lead. It's too easy for you not to connect the dots to figure out what's a real qualified opportunity or prospect and start to navigate through there. So connecting the dots to me is incredibly important. And when you think about it, if I go in a little hot, a little warm, I could probably get much higher in the organization. So let me give you an example. In the early Salesforce days, ADP was our first multi-thousand user customer. And we were going after a finance company that had what looked to be a great opportunity for Salesforce. And in just doing some basic due diligence, my rep came across the fact that the chairman of ADP sat on the board of this company. I happen to know the chairman because in my early part of my career, my first 5 years, I was hustling payroll for ADP. And so I sent him a note and I said, Gary, have been a while. Here's what I've been up to. I know you sit on the board of this company. Boy, we would love to get in there. I know we're doing some great things for ADP. Connected the dots. Got a note back from him. Not only did he connect the dots for me, he made the introduction. And he made the introduction to the gentleman who happened to be a dual role, CEO and chairman of the company. I went in with my boss, who was president of Salesforce at the time, and basically it was a $3-point-something million first call close. Right? That's the extreme. It doesn't happen often. It hasn't happened since. But the idea that your first meeting, you sit down with the chairman, like for a salesperson, if you guys know, it's gold, right? But the idea that we took a chance and said, help us make a connection. So I would say whatever you sell, whatever industry you're in, you have to figure out a way so that that first interaction you have, there's some warmness to it, there's some stickiness to it, there's something that opens up the door for you. You should never cold call. Shame on you if you haven't done the due diligence. Here's the other thing. It's not just about looking at their LinkedIn and seeing who you might have in common. See where else they worked. See what affiliations they have. See where they went to school. Maybe find out if they had a great career somewhere else, who were their biggest customers. Another example is I hired one of my RVPs because I went to my customer and said, who's the one guy I should hire out in Chicago? It took him 2 seconds and said, hire this one guy. It turned out to be a great hire. But we had that introduction to him. One that I'm really big on is whatever we sell, it's a team sport. And it's a full contact sport, meaning don't sit on the sidelines and watch and see what happens. but go in. If you've worked for me, and there's some folks in this audience that I see have worked at Salesforce with me when I've been there, we're all in. And we're all in meaning from our executive team on down to everyone supporting us. There's no dealers won or lost alone. And the reason why that's so important is that you get more sets of eyes and ears on a deal, and it does two things for you. It helps you mitigate your risk, and it helps you potentially upsell, because there's just more ideas. As long as you surround yourself with a set of folks that you trust, get them involved. This isn't a hero's game. You know, I'm much more impressed if you close a $5 million deal with a set of people that you acknowledge versus come to me and say, hey, we closed a $5 million deal and I'm unbelievable. Well, you're not. I mean, you're unbelievable because you closed that one transaction, but the fact is, boy, if you had a few other people helping you, they would have helped mitigate the risk, they would have helped you upsell, and it's a real team sport. So think about that, whatever you sell, can you create that team environment? There's got to be multiple roles for people, and that includes, by the way, your executive team. It may seem simple, but know when to call them in. Calling them in too early kills the objective, because you call an executive in too early, and immediately there are many buyers that look at a title and go right to the title. So next thing you know, now we play to a business card versus the team that's supposed to be leading it along to the right time. So there is a finessing of that, but think about this as a team sport. This may sound simple, get your face in the place, but I will tell you that if you want to know your customers better than they know themselves, you need to get inside the four walls of that customer. You need to walk the halls, and if you can, get badged. Because once you get badged, then that's the ultimate sign of trust. They want you there. They want you to help them. And by the way, I've had reps get badged, they haven't even sold the deal yet. But the customer knows, I want to do business with you, I want to do business with that person, and they're brought in. And once you get that trust, I start to know you better than you know yourself. And once I do that, then I can really be consultative. I can really share with you what I see, what I feel, what the vibe is. I'm building relationships. An example of that is we went and closed a very big deal. And we're all around the table, and their president came in, and we started presenting our playback to them. So one of the things I like my teams to do is do ride-alongs, either virtually or physically. Meaning if they're outside reps, I'm riding along with them. I want to see what a day in the life of a rep or a service representative looks like. Maybe virtually, where I'm listening in on a call, and I'm sitting in their call center, and I'm hearing how they pitch. But I want to be able to play back the facts. I want to be able to go to you and say, you know what, I know exactly what your problems are. Here's what we're hearing, and have quotes from them. But the ultimate compliment is when we had this president turn to his folks and say, we're going to do this, here's why. And he pointed to my rep. And he said, this guy knows our business better than we've ever known our own business. And he's identified problems that I've never heard one of you ever mention. He's identified problems that I know exist that I believe they could solve. So you want to know your customers better than know themselves, walk the halls. If you're an inside rep, walk the halls virtually. Because once you establish a relationship, you could have this virtual relationship with them over the phone. And you can close big multi-million-dollar deals, and they could sponsor you to other buyers. But take that as seriously as actually physically walking the halls. Another play, and this is the last play I'll share, but it's this idea of focus on why not versus why. Both in my personal life and my professional life, I hate the master of the obvious. I hate being someone comes across as so obvious that I learn nothing from it. There's nothing I can do because it's so damn obvious. And so when we sit down with the rep and we talk about strategy, if you tell me we're going to win because of all the 5 things that we do really well, that's obvious. That's the reason you're at this position where you're trying to close it. But that's not how you learn. And that's certainly not how you close these deals. The great reps, the great executives always dig into the red flags. And the great executives make it a point of spending way more time on the red flags in a deal review than they do in the other elements of it. Because understanding the why nots are why you close the big deals. Because that's the only reason why they won't sign the contract with you. But many times we get caught up in the euphoria of, we have this big deal, we have this thing we've been working on forever, we're going to close it, they love us, here's the reasons why. And then all of a sudden you realize you walk away from the strategy session and I have no idea what they really care about. Like, what are those reasons why they won't buy for you? So think about the why nots versus the whys. The why nots are what make the real big money. The why nots are the ones that make the folks that somehow, some way, make club every single year. They're always looked at the leaders in the organization because they're always paranoid. And it goes back to that idea of do not be arrogant, do not be cocky. Another story I'll share with you. We were working on a deal. There were two firms that were merging. We were working on a deal. It was in the very early days. And my rep was positive he was going to win this deal. So positive that as the firms were merging, he asked the executive team, myself included, I got it. Go help close some other deals. And it was a pivotal quarter in Salesforce history. There was a lot of things going on. It turned out to be one of the biggest quarters we had ever had in the early days. And we listened to him, and he was arrogant, he was cocky. As it turned out, he didn't close the deal, and they went with a competitor. And when we did a debrief with the customer, he's the one who shared with us the why nots. He said, I wanted to go with you. And you're right, the rep, he just took me for granted. Because he thought I was going to buy from you from all the whys. He never once challenged me on the why nots. Now, we were very fortunate a couple months later to actually win the business back. But in the time they called us and said, look, we might have made a mistake, we spent 5 months on 3 or 4 why nots. And that turned the entire sales cycle around. So think about that as a lesson. I mentioned 20 minutes is hard to get a lot through. The playbook has a lot of elements to it. There's a lot of tactics to support it. But I think most importantly, think about some of the high-level things that maybe you could bring back, and hopefully this was worth your time in this session. But think about the perspective. Think about when you go back to your companies, what is it, the mindset you want to set for your sales organization? What are the things you want them thinking about as they go into battle? Right? Every day it's a hand-to-hand combat. What do you want them thinking about? How passionate are they? Not cocky, not arrogant, but confident. You want them to think big. You want them to think out of the box. Any idea is a great idea, right? Because then you could all rally around it. And when you think about executing on the playbook, think about these 4 elements. None of them have ever let me down in my career. I think they're well suited for any industry that you're in. So we have 2 minutes, and then Tim's going to come back on stage and yank me off. So does anybody have any questions in 2 minutes?
Hey, David.
Hey.
Really great talk. Appreciate it. My name is Mark Birch from the Enterprise Sales Forum. And we had a talk recently around team-based selling. It was really good. Can you maybe share some anecdotes or some like a thought process around how to bring your internal team to help win deals?
Sure. So great question. I appreciate it. I think a lot of it's to one of the points I talked about in terms of perspective, own it. So if I own it as a rep, it's up to me to run it like I'm a CEO. And the best reps that have ever worked for me all think they're CEOs and all look at it as a responsibility. This is my company. And so they look at, Mark, they look at the people that surround them. Could be a sales engineer. The sales engineer is not a demo dolly. This is not a person where he or she gets wound up and say, go demo my product. No, they come into a strategy session. They're very much part of the collaboration from the minute you start a sales cycle. That's super important. And then over communicate. So I think for our team selling, the worst thing you could do is you get close on a sales cycle and you're actually thinking that I have a team concept going, you rely on other people, and then they'll end up telling you, you haven't even shared enough with me. I can't help you. I can't contribute to the cycle. So I would think the one lesson I'd take away from it is just over communicate and make everyone feel like they're part of it. And whoever owns that sales cycle, you have to let he or she act like the CEO. If you over-manage them, then you completely get rid of that concept of team sport, because then they're all going to look to whoever's over-managing them. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks again for the time, David. And this is Louis Gideon over at Take the Interview. My question was around our sales team is an inside sales team. You had mentioned a few strategies about how you can kind of walk the walls virtually.
Yep.
Wanted to know maybe a little bit more detail, if you have any, on some strategies to do that.
So I approach it very much the same way, just like I would ask somebody that I've met in person to sponsor me to somebody else. Over time, you kind of get a vibe when you're speaking to somebody that you've earned the right to bring them to the next level. You've earned the right to say to them, would you mind introducing me to so-and-so? The one thing you need to be careful on, and you do that particularly on the phone when you've not met them face to face, is not to make them think they're not as important as they really are, but it's that you want to help mitigate your risk. And a lot of it is that talk track around, I want to mitigate my risk. We've seen successful sales cycles that are successful for both us and the customer, and typically there are more people involved with both companies. And it's a single point of failure, which many times slows down. It's happened to all of us, but you think you have the right person and you don't. The weird dynamic for inside selling is that you build this relationship, you actually close the deal, and your dynamic in person is so different when you meet them eventually. And that just, it takes on a different life of its own. But otherwise, I would say approach it the same way. Call them, send them notes. We just did something where I've been connected with an executive. I haven't met him in person yet, just recently where I'm at Yext, and he got this huge promotion. We sort of built a relationship on the phone. Our teams are moving forward. And we just sent him a really nice thing of champagne. And he felt like it was a personal gift because he had gotten to know me over the last couple weeks, just speaking. I think I have time for one more. Yes, sir. Right. Got it. Okay, so his question was, and it'll be the last one, his question was, how do you define it? And the industry has gone through a lot of shifts. And I think a lot of it had to do when I got to Netscape. So when I got to Netscape, very little of us, including myself, knew much about the internet. And it was the wild, wild west. And you think about it, if you were active on the internet in '95, you had a Mozilla browser from Netscape, you had the web server, and that's about it. And then there were a couple of ancillary apps started developing. But I had to think about my first big deal, and it happened to be a local company in McGraw-Hill, and they wanted to buy it for everybody. Yet we were carpet bombing. Every Sunday you get your newspaper, and you get a browser from AOL with the Netscape browser in it, and you'd open up that plastic pack, stick it in your computer, spin it on up, and that's how you got to the internet, right? And then you hoped that you had some decent connectivity from your home, which you probably didn't. And so that really got me thinking, all the things I had done at ADP or Oracle leading up to that, I have to operate differently. And I kind of took a step back and said, what do we need? We need an enterprise contract. We have to change our presentation that we want to present a solution versus I'm going to sell you a bunch of browsers. And instead of $29.95, when you put a proposal for a couple $1 million, and they're like, wait, isn't that the same thing that was in the comics section on Sunday when you delivered my daily news or Post or Times? You're right. And that's what really kind of created it. And I think as time has gone on, I've looked at what I'm selling, look who the target audience is, sit down with my folks. And the other part about, I think Mark asked about teamwork, is this playbook's very collaborative. Even now when I'm at Yext, we're selling something different. We are a market leader in a market that we started, which is digital knowledge management, right? We sell a little bit differently, still differently than I did when I was at Salesforce, just because you have to be able to scale that thing and change it. And if you're not flexible to change it, you'll end up selling like you did 5 years ago, and you'll do okay, but not great. All right, guys, I appreciate it. You have a lot of things you can do on a day. I appreciate time with me.
Awesome.